let's find the presentation. Be a good place to start. And okay, so hopefully that's is all in view of everyone. Okay, so what I want to share today was the latest evidence for the use of e-cigarettes for smoking cessation. So these data are from the Cochrane review. We updated this it was published a few weeks ago, and this covers the last 4 years of data. So the last Cochrane review was published in 2016, and as you can imagine, things have changed a bit over that time. So these are, I can't say hot off the press, but pretty close to it. Now, you might remember from the previous data, there were only 2 randomized controlled trials of electronic cigarettes for smoking cessation. And so the overall strength of the evidence was relatively weak. Even though there's very good rationale for why e-cigarettes might help people stop smoking, a lot of people sort of criticized the evidence or said, well, there's just no case for it. We have to wait until the evidence gets stronger. Well, folks, the evidence has got stronger. So what did this particular review look at? It included all of the evidence up to January 2020. We did our usual searches for cohort studies and randomized controlled trials. Now, just a note there, the randomized controlled trials, that's when you take a group of smokers and you randomly allocate them to an intervention or a control group. They provide the most reliable evidence when we're looking at treatment effects, because the whole randomization controls for all of these other factors that might influence smoking cessation outcomes. So they're the best quality studies for this purpose. Also, the studies need to include at least 6-month outcomes. So they needed to follow people for at least 6 months after their quit day. We also looked at side effects from e-cigarettes as well, and the studies needed to report at least 1 week of unwanted effects. So in total in this review, we included 50 studies, and that's including over 12,000 adults who smoked. Now, the studies all compared e-cigarettes either with nicotine replacement therapy, varenicline, nicotine-free devices, so they were nicotine-free or zero nicotine e-cigarettes, behavioural support or no support at all. And what's different about this review is that it's now a living review, so searches are going to be run on a monthly basis starting from December, and we'll update this review as new evidence emerges. So instead of waiting another 4 years for us to get out and write this, we'll be doing this on a regular basis. So I'm just going to show you here the headline results. And these are sort of quotes, I suppose, from the Cochrane review itself. But we found that more people use this terminology probably stop smoking, because we can't be absolutely definite, but more people probably stop smoking for at least 6 months using nicotine-containing e-cigarettes than those that use nicotine replacement therapy or those that use nicotine e-cigarettes. So to summarize that, e-cigarettes were more effective than nicotine replacement therapy, and they were more effective than nicotine-free e-cigarettes. And there were 3 studies in each of those groups. The evidence regarding the comparison between e-cigarettes and just behavioural support or no support at all, a little bit weaker. And so we say they may help more people to stop smoking than behavioural support and no support at all. Now, the other thing I would just want to point out here in these studies that there's no magic cures. As you all know, smoking cessation is a hard thing. But those pie graphs on the right-hand side of the screen are just saying that for every 100 people that use e-cigarettes to help them quit smoking, 10 will stop long-term. And similarly, for every 100 people using nicotine replacement therapy, 6 will stop long-term. So you can see there that there are an extra 4 people for every 100 if you used e-cigarettes compared to using nicotine replacement therapy. Now, I'm just going to show you the forest plots. Don't get hung up on these too much, but this is what we love to produce in systematic reviews, and they just summarize the studies and the numbers. And what I've put in those red percentages at the end here are just the absolute quit rates. So these data here are all studies that compared nicotine-containing e-cigarettes with nicotine replacement therapy. So in Chris Bullen's study, these are the quit rates in e-cigarettes, just over 7% versus around 6% in the NRT arm. Peter Hayek's study, 18% quit smoking using e-cigarettes in a year versus around 10% in the NRT arm. And this was another study which showed a difference of 15% here. So 25% of those using e-cigarettes were quit versus the 10% of those using NRT, but smaller sample size.
Hayden, are they all using the same e-cigarettes, or are there different brands?
They're different brands of e-cigarettes, and certainly the one in the Bullen study wasn't a particularly good nicotine delivery device. The Peter Hayek study used a refillable, a tank system e-cigarette, so it was a bit better. And generally what you see as time goes on, the products get better, and so the quit rates go up in general. And I'll show you some data on nicotine delivery soon. So there's the overall quit rates when you combine the data from all three studies together, 14% in the e-cigarette arm versus 8% in the NRT arm. Now, these data are showing you differences between nicotine-containing e-cigarettes and non-nicotine-containing e-cigarettes. This comparison's a bit hard in that an e-cigarette that produces vapor still has some sort of therapeutic effects. You can still puff on it. You can still do something when you have a craving. So although one contains nicotine and one doesn't, it's not, in my mind, the perfect comparator. But here you go. Anyway, there are data to show that e-cigarettes that contain nicotine are significantly better than those that don't contain nicotine. And here are the data showing nicotine-containing e-cigarettes versus behavioural support only or no support. And again, overall lower quit rates because this first study here had lots of people in it. You can see here in the nicotine e-cigarette had over 1,000 people, but only 4 quit. So the quit rates were really low in this study, mainly because they sent out these devices to people that perhaps didn't even want to quit smoking. So it's a bit of a funny one to include there. But anyway, overall, when you still combine all of the data together, you still see this benefit of electronic cigarettes over nothing. But it depended really very much on the setting. The study by Holiday here was a small sort of feasibility study, and that was giving an e-cigarette at a session with your dentist, essentially, or you got brief advice to go and see your local stop smoking service, and they showed this difference here of almost 10%. And just a fourth comparison here is using a nicotine-containing e-cigarette in combination with nicotine replacement therapy. So this is kind of combination use. And in these two studies, they compared a nicotine-containing e-cigarette plus NRT versus a non-nicotine e-cigarette plus NRT. So you might say, well, what's the point? Well, of course, these products deliver nicotine in different ways. You can put a patch on that gives you a steady dose of nicotine over time, and you can use that e-cigarette when you need to. And again, you can see this significant difference in quit rates. What about adverse effects or side effects? Actually, in all of the studies, the proportion of people that experienced side effects was pretty low. And so you couldn't really tell whether there was a significant difference in side effects between those that used nicotine-containing e-cigarettes versus NRT, or nicotine-containing e-cigarettes versus non-nicotine e-cigarettes. So we couldn't really make any strong conclusions about this, but we can say that the most common side effects associated with e-cigarette use are the usual throat, mouth irritation, headache, cough, nausea, but most people get used to these over time. So, summary of findings, again, quotes from the Cochrane Review. E-cigarettes probably do help people stop smoking for at least 6 months. They probably work better than NRT and nicotine-free e-cigarettes. They may work better than no support or behavioural support alone, and they may not be associated with any serious unwanted side effects. And just on that last point, of course, these studies don't follow up people for a long time. In fact, the longest follow-up period was 2 years. So we're fairly confident within that sort of 2-year period that they're not causing any significant harm, but we don't yet know, of course, the harms associated with long-term vaping. But overall, I think pretty promising results. And I think the evidence is strong enough here to be confident in talking to clients and saying, look, if you want to use an e-cigarette, yes, there's a good chance that they will help you stop smoking. Now, this hasn't been the only systematic review this year. There was another one published a little bit earlier, but it shows the same results. So that's kind of good to see that the different groups doing these systematic reviews come up with with pretty much the same results here. So on this side, you're looking at the increase in quit rates using nicotine versus non-nicotine e-cigarettes. So almost a doubling in long-term quit rates, and similarly with nicotine e-cigarette versus NRT. This group sort of combined and all counselling included in this one, and found that overall there was again an almost doubling of the risk of the chances of quitting smoking long term. Now, I just want to touch on nicotine delivery from e-cigarettes. Now, you've seen this before. Some of you will remember this from previous talks, and this is from Peter Hayek's lab back in 2017. And this was when we had a whole lot of vapers come in and they tried different products on different days, and we measured their blood nicotine level over time, which is what you can see here, the rise in blood nicotine level over time by different device. This light blue line here is the nicotine delivery from a standard combustible cigarette. So that should be familiar to you. You all know it peaks up around 20 nanograms per mil, certainly within 5 minutes. Okay? And as you can see from these data from these older models of electronic cigarettes, nothing is good as smoking. Now, some of you might know about Juul. We can get Juul here. This is the product that's caused some controversy in the US, especially with use among teens and non-smokers. Again, this comes from Peter Hayek's group in London. And so this was independent, and they tested the standard Juul device, which contains 59 milligrams per mil. This is the nicotine salt device. Very elegant in design. Comes with these cartridges that are inserted into the battery device. And what you're seeing here in this black and white image is nicotine delivery from the solid line as a cigarette, and the dotted line is Juul. And I reckon you can probably all see that Juul performed equally as well, perhaps even better in some degree, as a cigarette did. So you can see this peak in blood nicotine within 5 minutes. Here it is, already working pretty quickly and peaking at that same level as smoking. So it appears to be a pretty good device at delivering nicotine, and certainly better than the other or older e-cigarettes. So here we have, this is a different sample, which is why the actual results are a little bit different. But in those that tried all 4 devices, look at this peak of Juul, over 25 nanograms per mil. This is a Vuse, which is a sort of cigar-like device that's quite high nicotine levels. This is the refillable devices, which lots of people use, peaking around 10 nanograms per mil, and here are the old cigar-like devices underneath. So Juul was pretty good. Apologies for the ends there. Grant very cleverly spotted that I'd used different terminology and I'd missed this one. ENDS are electronic nicotine delivery systems, e-cigarettes, vaping products. Okay. In this study, Juul was also rated as more satisfying than all of the other products, so that probably relates to its faster nicotine delivery. And this is the craving relief, again, comparing Juul versus cigarettes. And you can see there that they almost have the same craving relief as combustible cigarettes. Now, currently, there are no trials that test the efficacy of Juul for smoking cessation, but it would be really great if we had them. These data I've just shown you suggest that Juul might be really good for this purpose. Of course, the downside of all of this, if it delivers nicotine as well as smoking does, that long-term use might be more problematic. So, the better the delivery, the more likely people are to use them long-term. And I think that, I think these data sort of show why there may be some young never smokers that have become addicted to Juul. When it delivers nicotine like this, then there's obviously a chance that you're going to become dependent on Juul and carry on using those. So, this might be a device that's a little bit more carefully controlled and get, how you might access it. But I think for people who want to quit smoking, these sort of devices could be really very useful.
So, Hayden, with the Juul product, are they relatively common in New Zealand?
I wouldn't say they were common. So there are Juul-like devices. So there are devices, the old devices, something that looks a bit like Juul. Juul's also quite expensive, so you can buy it at a number of different outlets. If you Google Juul New Zealand, you'll find out where. But yeah, they're quite expensive.
And the pods, so they're a pod device, yeah, and they do come in different strength nicotine levels. Is that correct?
I think you can get them in 0 milligram, and I don't know that there's a middle strength, Grant. I'd have to have a look at this. Someone else might know.
Yeah, there is one. I'm sorry, Gustav. I think the protocol old, they have like 20 milligram and they have a 40 milligram version.
Okay.
And that's a local brand, by the way.
Yeah, great, thank you. So yeah, you'll get these different things. I don't know about the other devices, whether they've been, all of them have pharmacokinetic profiles like I've just produced. That would be really useful if companies did that to see actually what the nicotine delivery was. But there you go, that's what you have from independent studies looking at Juul. So has anything changed for what advice we give? I don't think so, because I think we were all saying that e-cigarettes can help people quit smoking before. I still talk about what we can offer in the Stop Smoking service, combination of stop smoking medications and behaviour support and so on and so on. For those, though, that want to use an e-cigarette, do tell them what you do know. And I think you can be more confident in saying that they can help people quit smoking, but as you saw from those data, certainly no magic cures. The same conversation about health risk applies, lower risk than smoking tobacco or less harmful than smoking tobacco, but we don't know the risks of long-term e-cigarette use. And of course, e-cigarettes of any kind should not be used by people who don't smoke. Certainly daily use more effective than intermittent use. Obviously, try and use the devices that give the best nicotine delivery, and you can see there that there are a number now that can do this. It may take practice to get the best out of the products and relieve urge to smoke, so you have to stick with it for a little bit. Not dissimilar to, of course, using nicotine gum, etc., etc. You've got to read the manufacturer's instructions, take care of it, and of course, stop combustibles, tobacco use as soon as possible. Grant, I'll just pause there. There's just a question on the Zoom, which is, you mentioned controversy with Jill. What was that? Is it because teenagers and non-smokers were becoming addicted? That's exactly what it was. That and this was particular really to the US, and partly because there was advertising. There was perhaps some direct advertising focused at young people, and so you started to see the use of Juul in young people in particular really skyrocketed. So there was some concern around that. And more recently, we've heard of people that have become, never smokers becoming addicted to these particular products. And having seen the pharmacokinetic profile of Juul, I'm not surprised there. So these products are not for non-smokers. Okay, Smoke-Free Environments and Regulated Products Amendment Act. I want to cover this because it comes into force on the 11th of November, so very soon. And there's some very interesting and useful information on the ministry website that I just wanted to highlight. And I think I saw Lee Sturgis on the Zoom earlier. So Lee, you can correct me if I'm wrong with anything at the end. But here's the basic timeline, which I constructed out of the information that was on there. So from the 11th of November this year, the same rules for smoke-free environments will apply for e-cigarettes and vaping. So no vaping in workplaces, schools, early childhood education centres, public transport. So anywhere that smoking's not allowed, vaping's not allowed either. Okay. Vaping, like smoking actually, would be allowed in dedicated rooms in hospitals and rest homes. So hospitals could potentially set up a dedicated vaping room if they really wanted to. There's no advertising, no sponsorship, no sales to under 18s. Okay, so that all comes into force on the 11th of November. There also starts a start of the process for retailers who want to become specialist vaping retailers. And this process starts with just by operating as a transitional vape retailer. Remember, there's going to be a difference between what you can buy in your general retail outlets like gas stations and dairies. You'll be limited to certain flavors. Vape shop owners will have be able to sell all, a bigger range of flavors, and there'll also be some other exemptions to the Act that they'd be able to take advantage of. But initially, this transitional vape retailer, they have to have at least 50% of their total sales from vaping to be a transitional vape retailer. If you're only selling 10% of your total sales of vaping products, then you won't be able to be a vaping retailer. Then 6 months later, notices showing smoking and vaping are prohibited must be displayed in schools and early childhood education centres. It just gives them a little bit of time to get that signage and things already. You won't be able to sell vaping products from this date that contain colours. From August next year, new regulations will come into force regarding packaging, product notification, so warning labels on packaging. There may be some standardised packaging. All products will be notified. You'll be able to search the database. Retailers will also need to apply to become specialist vape retailers, and this requires them to have a greater than 70% of total sales to vaping products here. And other retailers, so gas stations, dairies, will only be able to sell tobacco, mint and menthol flavoured products. November next year, you'll have all the specialist vape retailers in place. By the way, the Motor Vehicle Act comes into force there as well in November, so that's the sort of no vaping in the cars thing. And by February, there's a few other little bits and pieces I haven't shown on here, but this will be full implementation complete. Now, what was really perhaps useful for you are the information on the ministry's website about vaping information for stop smoking services and health workers. Now, the Act, of course, prohibits any advertising with vaping products, but there are some exemptions for suitably qualified health workers. I'll talk about who that is in a minute, but it means that any advice or message given by a suitably qualified health worker to an individual or group for the purpose of supporting them to switch from smoking to vaping will be allowed. So you'll be able to talk about these things with people. And we'll also allow the publication and dissemination of research, also some media articles or commentaries, as long as they are not funded by the manufacturer or importer of the product, will be allowed. So you'll be able to talk about these products, have research or brochures that would promote people switching from smoking to vaping. So as an aid to stop smoking. In terms of who is a suitably qualified health worker, you're one of these if you're a registered health practitioner, a person that's completed the Stop Smoking Practitioners Program, a person who's undertaking the program has been supervised by someone, so that's if you haven't passed it yet, as long as you're working under supervision, you're a suitably qualified health worker, and a peer support worker has been supervised by someone who's completed the program as well. So that really covers all of you as suitably qualified health workers. Now, what about providing vape products to support smoking cessation? Well, again, there's some exemptions under the RAT Act that apply directly to stop smoking services. And I've just taken this from the ministry website. So to quote here, the supply of free or discounted vaping products as part of a publicly funded stop smoking program, whether directly or via an industry participant, such as a specialist vape retailer, is exempt from those rules under the Act. Okay, so you can supply these products as part of a publicly funded stop smoking program. I won't go into too much detail about how you might read that or what you might do, but I think that if you are using vaping products, and I know some stop smoking services are, no worries, carry on. So some good news there. So I'll finish up because I've probably talked for long enough. But look, the evidence has certainly strengthened in regard to e-cigarettes helping people stop smoking. We still don't understand the full risk profile, so it's really about balancing the benefits versus the risks. I'd really like to try some of these new, better nicotine delivery devices with smokers, but I think also that we have to be mindful of long-term use. So again, I think talking to people about this and say, look, this is, might be much better at helping you quit smoking, but there is a chance that, long-term use might be more of a problem. And I suppose that we might see a few more of those people using products long-term. But if it helps them stop smoking, and that's where the main risks are, then I think the balance of risks favours using e-cigarettes for smoking cessation.
Hayden, do you think that countries and jurisdictions who don't agree with vaping as a useful product to help people off smoke tobacco, do you think they're coming around to it, or is there always going to be this no, we're never going to allow it, to yes, we may allow it? Is it changing at all, or is it pretty...
I don't know. I have a feeling that there are some jurisdictions that have made a decision that vaping is a tobacco product and all tobacco products are bad, therefore we're not going to allow it. But prohibition very rarely works, and if people find them helpful and it stops them using a deadly product, which is actually quite an expensive deadly product, then people are just going to get around and use it anyway. But I always am hopeful that people can look at the science and change their mind, because that's what we should all do. In the face of new evidence, reevaluate what we're thinking. But I'm not quite certain that everyone holds that view.
Okay, all right. And there's been quite a few questions come through on the chat function. One of them was concerning access to these slides.
They'll be on, you'll be recording these, so...
of course, yes. Yeah.
They'll be there.
Yeah. They'll be viewable, but I'm not sure if you'll be able to extract the data, but if you contact me, if you want some statistics out of the slides, let me know and I'll be able to help. So if you could just go through the chat questions, Hayden, and comment on those, that would be great.
So just one from Lee. Brendan Baker's doing a Zoom meeting for the smoke-free enforcement officers. Is that open to anyone else, Lee? Or is it just going to be the enforcement officers?
I'm not sure if she can unmute.
Oh, we can find out later from that. Right, retailers, how will they find out and who's going to monitor? Ileana has actually very kindly replied that the vaping regulatory agency will check those and check compliance with that. Yeah, so there will be a process in place. I don't think that we as Stop Smoking Services need to know all of that detail or provide answers to vaping services, and certainly don't put them wrong. There's going to be a process for that, and on the Ministry of Health website, there's a section for retailers. So you can just direct them there. The information's all up there. Should funded Stop Smoking Services support people to stop vaping? Good question. And how many people out of all people coming to Stop Smoking Services are requesting support to stop vaping?
Yeah, I have heard of a few coming through.
Yeah, well, I think that, in the future we may see some more. I don't have any good evidence or good skills to tell you about how you go about helping people stop vaping. I've not really looked into it in any great detail. I would imagine though that you might approach it in a similar way to how you stop people using NRT long term, and we do that already. Well, at least many services do, or they carry on providing NRT for people. The other people that might be able to help are the specialist vaping retailers. So you might be able to use a reduced strength of nicotine to help you get off the vaping products. But look, I don't think this is really I mean, I'd approach it, if someone came to me for help to stop vaping, I'd do my best to do so within the knowledge that I have. I don't think that you need a change in rules or regulations to help support people. It might be one or two people out of a much larger proportion of people who smoke.
Yeah, I think, I'm sorry, I just would like to make a comment. And in the UK, I heard of some services that are providing the nicotine patch. And the nicotine patch helps people to reduce the needs from vaping. So that's kind of one of the ways in which people are like, when somebody requests that they want to stop vaping or reduce the amount of vaping they do on a regular day or in a week, so they recommend they use a patch, and I think that's how they do it. That's how I heard they do it in the UK.
So that would be the same approach that we use with long-term nicotine replacement therapy. So start on a full-strength patch, and then you can reduce the pack strength over time. And Grant, I think we've got a webinar about this thing from maybe last year or a couple of years ago, so that it should still be in the archive.
Cutting down to quit.
Yeah, or long-term NRT use, I think it might be.
Yeah.
And Fiona just said, I have a few and they work by reducing milligrams first. So there you go.
Excellent. All right. Just take the opportunity to thank the people who have been requesting topics for these clinical webinars. We have got those. Hayden was quite keen this session to deliver around the new Cochrane review results. So we'll come back to your suggestions over the coming couple of months. But thanks for doing that. Keep them up. If there are any topics you would like Hayden to have a look at and maybe present on, do send them to us at Inspiring or through our NTS website. That would be great. Okay, Hayden, thank you very much for that. I don't know if there's any more questions coming through.
There are just a few about the slides, so I think you've answered that. the Cochrane review is online, it's free, so you can download the whole review. It has got a plain English language summary to it, so it's something that's fairly simple to read. So if you Google Cochrane e-cigarettes, you'll get the latest review. You can download the whole lot and pass it on to people that may be a little bit more skeptical. So that's all there.
Can you just explain what the Cochrane library is?
So the Cochrane library is a library of systematic reviews. So systematic reviews are reviews that involve some robust methodology to collect together all of the data on a specific topic and try and put it all together. So there's a whole whole range of topics in the Cochrane library. Even within the tobacco control group, there are quite a number. And it's the place that you should go to if you want to find something out. It will tell you what the evidence is for any particular topic. So there's one on nicotine replacement therapy, there's one on antidepressants for smoking cessation, and you should just get into a habit of Googling, looking, reading. We're lucky here in New Zealand, we do get it for free, so I really encourage you to make use of that.
Excellent, thank you.
Maurice had one more question. Is this evidence enough for the MOH to fund these products? It's a good question. I think that one of the difficulties is that generally ministries of health or health systems would fund medications. Juul or any e-cigarette is not a medication. If it was approved as a medication, then yes, it could be funded. But at the moment, these aren't, so I don't think that the Ministry of Health is likely to fund these. That doesn't, of course, stop other organisations from funding or partially subsidising these products. And I'm always reminded of some words from Rebecca Rufu-Collins with her Vape to Save group, that there was something in it about putting some skin in the game, about purchasing these devices yourself meant that you valued them a little bit more. So I don't know, maybe it's some sort of negotiating discounted rates on behalf of your clients with vape shop owners. That might be a way that we support people.
All right, well, thank you so much, Hayden. That was fantastic. And again, that's been recorded, so it will be up on our website in a couple of days, or in a day or so. So if colleagues who couldn't make it this morning, let them know that it's up there. So our NTS website, it'll be under clinical webinars.
There'll no doubt be some questions from this in the annual practicing certificate questions.
Oh, okay. Yeah, something to look forward to. All right. Thank you so much, everyone, for attending. And thank you, Hayden, for another great webinar. That was fantastic. And we will see you next month.
Absolutely. Okay.
All right. Cheers, everyone.